So tell me a little bit about you.
Ooh, where do we start?
Yeah.
Is it the Saturday I was born or like
You
what?
were born Saturday?
I was born on a Saturday. It was a market day.
Do you know the time?
I have no idea, but Mom did tell me she had to finish
My daughter was
her
born
grocery
Saturday.
shopping.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she had to finish. You know, 'cause Nigeria, we go to the market. You know,
Yeah,
you go to the market
yeah,
on Saturday. And so she
We go to
was
market
like,
on Friday.
oh, you guys go on Friday. Yeah. And so she was like, she felt it. She was like, oh, no, we're not going to have food in the house if I don't finish this. So she finished the market day before she said Dad to take her to the hospital to have you.
Which number are you?
So I'm the first for my mom and my dad, but my mom was married before, so I have 2 half siblings.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, we have that in common too. So
Yeah.
I have 2 half siblings.
Large family. There's 7 of us. So
you were born in Nigeria.
I was born in Nigeria.
How's it like growing up there?
Although we lived there for a bit, but I was born in Port Harcourt, which is like the southern part of Nigeria. Born there, lived there till I was about 6 years old. My dad was in oil and gas, and so we ended up in Muscat, Oman, so in the Middle East. We were expats there for another 5 or so years, so that's why I did my elementary education. And then
Speak Arabic a little bit? Or
no, just I do my assalamu alaikum, my shukrans, my, you know,
The
basics
yeah,
to get by, so that
Yeah.
it gets people to open up to you, and you're like, they're like, oh, you know, they light up, and you're like, I got you, but that's it. Then I went back to Nigeria for high school, went to boarding school. And boarding school is common in Nigeria, you know, since being in the United States, people have always said, ooh, boarding school. But you know, we were colonized by the Brits, so our school system is British.
Okay.
And, you know, the British go to boarding school. So our secondary schools, uniform, the whole thing. You know, looking in the moment, it didn't seem too strange to me because that's just what everyone did. For me, it was just hard. You know, there's rules that had to be made a certain way, like the envelope on your sheets had to be folded in a certain way and folded. So everything, there was just so many rules. I just remember growing up with all these rules and feeling like, I was one of those kids that was, why? I was like, why do you have to do this? Why does it, our skirt had to be pressed a certain way. You had to see the line. And oh my goodness. But now I look back on it, and it really is kind of like where that discipline comes from doing the same thing repeatedly, right? Excellence comes from discipline. You can't be excellent at anything you're not disciplined with. So, you know, in hindsight now, when I think back at my secondary education and being in an all-girls school, there was also something empowering about being in an all-girls school. You know, my chemistry teacher, for instance, was female. My math teacher was female. So it wasn't odd for me to see women doing hard things. And then I immigrated to the United States for college.
So from what year to what year then? 6 years to 6th grade to what?
So till 12th grade.
Till 12th grade,
yeah.
okay.
And then I came here at the age of 18. That was back in 1999.
You came here through scholarship, or how do you come?
So a combination of both. My dad had some academic scholarship, some athletic scholarship, so I walked onto the track team. And so it was like that. And then my dad covered some of it. I was fortunate to not graduate from college with student loans, with everything being covered. And then when I got there, of course, you know, while you're also in school, just earning other different scholarship money, and like I was a resident assistant, so I got to live, room and board for free, and then got like a stipend because I was a resident assistant. So things like that, like through college, kind of figured it out too. Once I figured the system, but man, that was a culture shock coming to the United States.
Yeah. What part of the U.S.?
Maine.
Of all places.
Maine.
It must be cold.
Everything was a shock. It was cold. It was predominantly white. I'd never seen snow a day in my life.
Even Oman?
Oman, no, of course not in Oman.
I thought part of places.
There's some of the in the mountains, but we were in Muscat, so I never, you know, I'd heard about it getting cold, but never experienced any of that.
Okay.
It's funny because, well, there's no snow in Nigeria, but the northern part of Nigeria also gets very, very cold.
Okay.
But I'm from the south. I'm a tropical, like 2
Sandals
degrees above the equator. Right. Always been in sunshine and humidity my whole life till I got to Maine. That was a culture shock.
Were you by yourself? Or?
I was by myself. Okay. I didn't have any family. My dad had gone to college in Maine, so was familiar with the state, but just not familiar with the people. And I studied mechanical engineering because when your parents send you overseas. There's only a short list of.
That's the immigrant. You'll either be a lawyer, accountant, engineer, nothing between. No chef.
What do you mean you're discovering? What do you mean you're undecided your first year? No. What do you gen eds? No. You had to know what you were doing before you went. Exactly. So mechanical engineering was it for me. But my dad's a biochemist, so I grew up with a dad that was a STEM. Really, I went to math camp. I didn't go to band camp. Even in secondary school, you could pick the art track or the STEM track. So I had to pick the STEM track. So in a way, there's nature versus nurture. I was nurtured into being a STEM kid and doing mechanical engineering. And so, did the traditional college thing, ran track there, and then graduated. And I had no idea where life would take me. It's not like we had this long range plan when I immigrated here on what I was going to do, what my life plan was going to be. I could have gotten the job. I could have gone back, I got a job, had a job right out of college with Georgia Pacific, a large U.S. corporation. And so took the job. It's been here ever since.
The American dream.
The American dream. The American dream.
So when you came to Ohio?
So Ohio happened in 2010. How so? So I, did the engineering thing and was somewhere about 5 years into it. Well, so first of all, as an immigrant, you're on different visas, right? So when I came, I was on the student visa. Then I had my OPT. Then the company that hired me, Georgia Pacific, filed for my H-1B, which is the employer-sponsored visa. The employer-sponsored visa is not indefinite, right? That's for like 6 years. So did that, worked in my engineering, and as we got closer to, because after the 6 years, the company has to file for your green card, right? So as we got close to that time when they were getting ready to file, I just started to have this trepidation, like, I don't want to be an engineer for the rest of my life. But at the same time, I want this green card, but I also don't want to be an engineer for the rest of my life. Catch-22, right? So when I asked my boss at the time, I wanted to do kind of like a different type. I wanted to go into operations. I'd been straight in engineering. I did project engineering, process engineering, very, very technical. And I wanted to do operations. I kind of wanted to move into like becoming more like a business executive. Yeah. And I thought, well, because I had gotten my MBA while working. And so it just seemed like the natural, and it was...
See the other side of the business.
Yeah, see the other side of business. And I was getting all this pushback by, oh no, you're just so highly skilled in this. We want you to be an engineer. So I felt like I had these handcuffs on me because they were the sponsors of I was going to have to be an engineer for the rest of my life, and I couldn't wiggle my way out of that. And so the only other way to do it was to go back to school. And so I decided to become a lawyer because I knew I didn't want to do engineering long term.
This is after you get your MBA?
It's after I got my MBA. To get back into a student visa, I'd always kind of thought, I think law is a better career for me, but I thought that required, in my mind, like stacks and stacks and stacks of reading. Yeah. Which I just didn't have the tolerance for. I love to read for leisure, but why would I want to...
assignment and stuff like that. Gotcha. I'm with you there.
Right. You're an accountant, you know what I mean?
I know.
Right, yes.
Yeah, there's a leisure time, you flip around. There's like not so leisure, you have to recall stuff, remember stuff.
Right. Yeah. So that part was intimidating, but ultimately I was like, okay, I'm going to do the hard thing. And so I jumped out of that line. Plus at the time, you remember we had the economic downturn of 2008. The backlog on the employer-sponsored green cards were like 10 years long. Wow. It was crazy. And so I was like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, we can't even sponsor our own, so let alone get somebody from outside. Yeah.
So I was like, ooh, all right, let me just get back into school. And so that's when I came to Ohio in 2010, because I went to Case Western. That's where I went to law school.
Gotcha.
And so that's where my Ohio story began in 2010.
Wow.
Yeah, and I went to Cleveland. I was in Cleveland.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's just, I don't want to say by accident, but you have the background to kind of sort of do the education side of the law. Yeah. You went to the law, but what kind of inspired to kind of sort of get in like front of public and do like the serving?
So 2018, I moved. So, graduated law school. I was a non-traditional law student. I had my kids. So my daughter was born like February, graduated in May. My son came 4 years later. I was in private practice. I did intellectual property law, still doing intellectual property law, which was this great to leverage my engineering background was to do intellectual property law, because I worked with inventors. I helped bring new products and services to market, whether that was through patents or trademarks or
so you did
contracts.
some patent work.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, like contracts, those kind of things. And then in 2018, I moved to Columbus. I took a job in-house with a client, and that required a move to Columbus. And so when I moved to the Columbus area, the question is, where was I going to live? My daughter was just about starting kindergarten at the time, which was 5. My son was 18 months. And so I started to think about family, where do we want to live, good schools, all these kind of things, safety, all these dynamics in trying to decide a place. Location was also important to me. On top of all those other things, I didn't want to be too far away from downtown. The job was downtown, so that I could get to the kids quickly. And so certain communities kept coming up. Upper Arlington, Bexley, Grandview. These are the communities that came up, so that's where we kind of narrowed my search. Ultimately, the house was in Upper Arlington, and so moved to Upper Arlington.
What part in Upper Arlington?
I'm in the north corner by Henderson.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
what's called the Greensview neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that little pocket. We're by the Kenny Square that has the Tensuki market, all the Japanese markets. Amazing. So so that's the little nook or haven in Upper Arlington.
I enjoyed my time in Upper Arlington.
How did you guys choose Upper Arlington? What was it?
Well, my sister used to be an OSU professor. She's the one who sponsored us. So we came here as a refugee status after the Civil War. So she sponsored us. It took us, I don't know, maybe a couple of years, maybe 3 years for us to get here.
Yeah.
So I'm straight to Columbus. Straight to Upper Arlington.
That must have been a culture shock.
It was culture shock. Culture shock of the snow, culture shock of the area in which we were living at the time, culture shock about all the places, really. But the good thing is we came like in a group. I didn't have to kind of, figure out, who to be friends with and all that stuff. So, we didn't speak English well, we didn't know much about anything about the Western side. So we just have to learn. So, when you're going through that experience with other people, it makes it a little bit easier, right? So it wasn't too much of a difficulty. Yeah, it was a good time. Good time. I'll tell you, this is the first story. After working hard, I never had a job, right?
First job. Right.
First job.
My first job was in the United States too.
Yeah, United States. So worked very hard, saved up, I don't know, $1,500, and we went to go buy a car. Used car. It was 87 Golf. My brother-in-law at the time, we checked it out. He's like, yeah, this is good buy for what you're trying to get. We'll get you around all that stuff. So we bought it. The battery died. So I don't understand that. So I was kind of saddened by. I left it. So we had to go find somebody who knows, who's a mechanic. Just only the battery. Just nothing. Your money didn't go to waste. So we just changed the battery really quick. So that thing held me for a good 2 years. It's not bad for $1,200, I think it was at the time. We got to know the area, and I think it was after 9/11 that we start to see a lot of Somalis came here.
It's a big population in the Columbus area.
Yeah, it's somewhat, I don't know, 50,000 or nearby that. So it's it's a lot of people. A lot of Somali people, yeah. So then after that, you just kind of grow with it. Went to school, started ESL, learned that. Went to Columbus State, so worked my way up, get to corporate America, stayed there for a while. Finally, I was like, okay, let me find my way and trying to do the immigrant thing. Let me do a business, be entrepreneur and try. So it's been good since then. So,
when did you decide to leave Upper Arlington?
I was there for like about 4 years. My sister lived there at the time, so we were always not too far. So I moved down to where, I don't know if it still is, Olentangy River Road, Ackerman.
Yep.
There is apartments that are linked to OSU. But then there's other apartments on Riverview. So we used to live there. There's a masjid there, mosque. So there's a mosque there. It's small, but now it's like, it's a bit huge. I moved there. Then I was going to, Columbus State. Kind of worked it out. I never went back since then. But I always go there. I mean, Lane Avenue and all that. That's where we used to frequent, Yes. And I don't know, well, you want to hear maybe it's still there, but Linux wasn't built at the time. So that there was a dollar theater on Bethel Road.
Okay.
That's where everybody used to go. I mean, like when I say everybody, like the whole high school kids and all, probably. I mean, that place on Saturday was just, we couldn't find places to park. Yeah, so I kind of grew up in the northwest side. Then after that, then I moved back to Henderson and Reed. So I'm familiar with that whole. I'm very familiar with that whole area. My sister, when we first came, when you come from Riverside, Lane Avenue, there's some nice houses there.
Yes.
Very nice houses there. She used to kind of sort of take us in between the houses, so we'll come down somewhere in Tremont. And I'm like, we could just sit there watch and dream, right? Like, damn, yeah. When I grow up, I want to be just like that. Still wishing and praying.
Hey, at least it gives you something to dream about. Absolutely.
At least you're representing them.
Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
What dreams are made of.
What dreams are made of. So how hard is to run that campaign? I bet it was tough.
You know, as an adult, we have words. And on top of that, I can take myself to places. I was taking myself to work, and I was culturally exposed to different things and, you know, driving through the city. But as a kid, that's their community. You know, I love the stories you told earlier about walking to places, working here, then you walk here, then children live in community. They walk those sidewalks, they go to the schools, they go to those stores, they eat from those restaurants, they, you know, entertain themselves in the community. And so it became apparent to me that she wasn't seeing a community reflected back to her that looked like her. And while I understand the makeup of Upper Arlington is the makeup of Upper Arlington, because, you know, some people say you can't make people, it's private market, you buy the home here. And if you want to buy the home, you live here, right? So I get that. But redlining got us to where we were. Let's start there if we want to historically look at it. But that aside, you know, we're not the sins of our fathers, right? We have the community that we have now. We can still build in exposure. By that I mean, why is she not seeing her first black teacher till middle school, right? Recruiting, completely within government control. Look at our police force. Look at when she goes to City Hall. All those things, the people that you recruit, completely within government. As I think about economics, I think about procurement. I think about how are we spending the city's money. You know, this city has a $55 million operating budget. Are we critically thinking as we spend that money, who are the minority businesses that it's going towards? As we think about our parks and our rec programming, when our parks brings in music in the park, are we critically kind of thinking about what kind of music in the park are we bringing in? And not just to expose my daughter, but to expose also the people that she does community with. And so those were the kind of things that I was thinking about as this community of choice, how I want to see, I want my daughter to be able to, I wanted my daughter and my son to be able to say, where's home? Because my son was 18 months old. The only home he knows is Upper Arlington.
Yeah.
So to be able to say it, I remember about that time when I was contemplating running for office, and this was the thing that just, you know, nailed it for me and sealed it for me. I was walking the park and met an older lady. She had lived in the community for 40 years. An Arabian lady, so she was covered up. And she was with her daughter, who was born and raised there. They were walking. And it's funny, because when I asked daughter where she was from, it took a while before she said Upper Arlington, like, you know, but that's where she's from. It was kind of like, well, I was born here, my mom's from me. And it's like, I want everyone to be able to, that grows up in Upper Arlington, regardless of what you look like, to be able to say Upper Arlington is home. And I wanted that for my daughter. And I felt like we were getting to a place where she wouldn't say it with full confidence that Upper Arlington is home. So that's what caused me to run for office. I was naive, and perhaps being naive is the courageous thing, because if I had known more, I would have been too scared to do it.
I agree with you. Yeah. When you don't know stuff, you know, you go full head on. You know, what was that song? F around and find out.
Yes, it's full energy. It's like, oh yeah, that guy can just do this. But of course, as I've gotten into the room, you know, Hamilton says this, you know, the room where it happens and stuff. And I've always known this. We're not the way we are because there's any malicious intent, right? It's that it's not people's lived experiences. They don't know. If you want to see change, you bring the change, right? It's no one is going to just change, right? So when you ask, how is it like governing? It's thinking about some of them are marginalized, some of the people's voices that are not at the table. How do I advocate for that, understanding that we're not a monolith. You know, I'm a Black African woman. It's very, very different than a Black American woman. You know, that intersectionality is so different. And so to be able to advocate well, it's really understanding that community. It's really understanding their differences, what they would like to see, those kind of things, and just being the voice.
I want to ask a question about that intersection between African women and versus African American women. That intersection, how is it viewed?
God, that's such a dynamic question. You know, my experience is that the United States lumps all Black people into one. I'll give an example of this.
That's been my experience too as well.
Yeah, I'll give my experience of this. When my first Black History Month in the country, this was 2000, my first MLK. I'm walking campus, so this was January 2000. I remember this very well. I'm walking campus. It's desolate because it's a long weekend. A lot of students are gone. And a reporter comes up to me, and just purely because I'm Black, asks me how I feel about Martin Luther King Jr. What does Martin Luther King Jr. mean to me actually was the question. Camera in my face, microphone, right? Reporter, she's just taking quick sound bites from everyone. And I froze, not because I didn't know who Martin Luther King Jr. was. Right. I knew him historically, and that's only because I feel like by the time I learned about him, I was taking some class in secondary school. It was like an elective class. It wasn't even general, you know. So, but for that experience, I never would have heard about Martin Luther King Jr. So I knew he was, but he didn't on me. It wasn't like I knew more about Nelson Mandela, for instance, being African, than I knew about Martin Luther King Jr., right? And I stood there kind of frozen for a bit while the reporter, and I was like, I blurted out that I was Nigerian. Yeah. It still had the confusing looks. And I was like, well, I know who he is, but, you know, and we kind of got off camera. And I was trying to explain to the reporter that I just felt weird answering that question. Because I knew if people heard it, it's not that he just doesn't have the same influence on my life. And I haven't learned about him the same way. Now, of course, fast forward 30 years later, I've learned more about him. I understand how he impacts American culture, impacts the civil rights movement, and really what that is. But at that time, because we're all viewed in the same lens, you're black.
Absolutely.
But my experience is, if anything, my race hasn't limited, at least up until that point when I'm growing up, my race hasn't limited opportunities for me. My race hasn't limited how I think about myself. If anything, growing up in Nigeria, my gender did. Being a female, that was a bigger barrier for me to overcome. That was a bigger barrier for me to prove than being black. So that's what I mean when I say we're missing in sex. So I don't come with that mindset. I almost don't. It took a while to start even picking up on what the Gen Zs call shade, or like those unconscious biases, or thinking, oh, that's that reaction because they must think I don't know based on my race. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
My ignorance cap is a little bit different.
No, it's funny that, you know, you start to pick things that mean well, but they really don't mean well. You understand?
Right.
It took me a long time until I get into corporate America, and you just hear phrases, and the culture of that environment will teach you slowly. You begin to learn. And there's one thing that I learned from corporate America. I learned how to predict things.
Yeah.
Prediction. It wasn't something that I kind of sort of like, I learned how to predict things. And that kind of served me in a way that I'm like, get away from that route, stay on this route, stay on this side, stay on that side. And after a while, it just kind of, it becomes
corporate speak.
Yeah, it's become numb to a lot of things. Then you see a fresh blood coming into the doors and all bubbly, and you'd be like, poor person.
You shall learn.
Yeah, you shall learn. So, and after a while, you just like, man, you get to a certain age, and you start blaming, like, why the hell can you get your shit together in Africa, man?
Yes.
Why the hell can you get your shit together so we don't have to go through here? And that's a whole different.
I know.
Yeah, it's like a rabbit hole. Then you come back to here. I'm like,
this is opportunity.
This is opportunity. Everybody immigrated here. Why the hell do you have more opportunity? I mean, then you have kids. Then you have a different mentality. I mean, it's just funny how life becomes full circle.
It does become full circle.
Yeah, and it's really hard to break certain things, certain speed bumps that has been set up. Before you were
before you existed.
Yeah, like I'm looking for my daughter's 9 now, and I'm thinking that the same situation with the hair thing, identity, another thing. So we intend to learn our culture, the Somali American culture, or the Somali culture from back home from me that trying to insert in her, insert in my family, and at the same time things that, because they spend more time with their teacher outside the house than they spend with us. So, they get up from school, you get them to a program. If not, then dinner, time to go to bed. It just kind of, you get into that routine. The weekend comes, then you kind of figure out, I'm like, okay, well, I went through some things that I know that probably it might not be a challenge for her, but still a challenge.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate with that? My wife and I kind of having a conversation all the time, like, the best we can do is just increase the confidence and the value.
Increase the confidence.
Yeah.
Your individuality in itself is power.
It's interesting, though. It's an interesting experience. So you navigated those. Obama said that, walking into those rooms.
Yeah.
It's not what I thought it was. Change that I was advocating for, man, damn, it's really hard to change things. Do you feel that?
Absolutely.
Like when you walked into those...
Absolutely. One of America's greatest experiments of things is democracy, right? But democracy is also a power of numbers, right? It's the majority wins.
Yeah.
And getting the majority to win is an art in understanding, right? For me on council... 7 votes, so majority means you need 4 yeses for something to happen.
So we're talking about when you get into those rooms, there are some people that you certainly can see, or some folks that are not being broadly represented. So how challenging is that for you to kind of sort of cover the broader range for people that are not being able to speak for themselves?
I don't know if challenging is the word. The challenge comes from trying to actually make the change on their behalf. Sometimes you hear, you want this change for 2% of the people, right? That's sometimes how people think about things in numbers.
That's very high level too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question when it's like, well, it's not. When you say 2%, you are focused on the what's now. You're not focused on the future of what it attracts, what could be. That's the challenging part. That's always kind of hard to advocate. But then on top of that, democracy, right? You've got to get 4 of the 7 people to agree that's the right thing and to vote for it, because that's actually how laws get changed. Democracy says you vote for it. And so it's been an art learning how to get to those votes. Some things are obvious and some things are just the right thing to do. And generally, I believe in the good of humanity, and those things are not challenging, doing the good things.
What are some of the pushback did you see?
Right now, here, the big thing that we're experiencing in Central Ohio, and our community is not any different, is housing. Thing about Upper Arlington, we're a 9-square-mile radius city. We're landlocked. We're fully developed. It's a 110-year-old community. Every land in Upper Arlington has something on it. And so the pushback is, in order for us to help or get in on solving the housing problem, we need to densify. If you take something down, when you put it back up, it needs to be 3 or 4 more than it was before, right? And that causes density. Yeah. And that creates that whole NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. No, it can't be that high. No, it can't be that dense. Those are challenges. But it's the language around it that is sometimes hard or hurtful to hear. It's those people. What do we mean by those people? Right? Or it's not caring enough for the future to say, well, that's not my problem. I have a house now. And it's like, well, people can't even buy into the community. Then we're creating, and I love this term, and I learned this term from the mayor of Austin, we're creating generational inequity. The thing about Upper Arlington is 100 years ago, you may have gotten that house for $50,000. I don't know, maybe $100,000. And now it's $500,000, $1 million, whatever. The average home in Upper Arlington is like $700,000 or something crazy like that. You're creating generational inequity because you're not thinking about the future person that's going to buy into the community. It's getting people, that's the challenge, is getting people to care outside of themselves just because they're comfortable and they have a spot and they're living in their dream community and enjoying their dream community as is now. Why should I change for the purpose of some unknown person that I don't know?
It's difficult. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to change that. So now, early on, you said, if you don't know things, you just kind of sort of fully go in. Now, you're in there now, and you've seen that. Would you advise other person to kind of sort of come and, go through the same steps that I've done?
Absolutely. There are lived experiences out there that are not at the table. There's advocates, there's allies, and then sometimes you need to be in the room yourself. You need to be the person telling the story, how it impacts, why it makes a difference. It's not going to sound as convincing coming from an advocate or an ally. And what we have is a lot of allies and advocates doing the work, doing the thing. And sometimes the impacted people also need to be the ones running for office and need to be in it.
Upper Arlington has changed physically, and some buildings get demolished. There's new buildings getting built up, all that stuff. Do you see there's a new young and generation that's incoming to the area?
Yeah, there's definitely a new energy around the community. I think the last stats I saw in the last 10 years, well, first of all, half of that is because Central Ohio itself is changing, right? The demographics of the people coming to Ohio, to Central Ohio, is vastly different. Most of the growth in Ohio came from immigrants, right? And so that's absorbed by all communities. But also Upper Arlington itself, I read the stats, and something like 30% of the community is new in the last 10 years. And people don't know that or think that. They still think about this 110-year-old community and still think there's all these dinosaurs that live in Upper Arlington. That's not quite the case. And then we also just have a lot of redevelopment going on. That blue Lazarus building you talk about is torn down. Community center the community center that's going to be opening up in April has gone up there. There's been some zoning changes, so we have planned mixed use districts. Upper Arlington used to originally be a bedroom community. There were no businesses, very, very few. I think it was zoned like 2% businesses back in the day. And that's slowly changing as we now have planned mixed-use development districts, Kingsdale being one of them, right? We're taking a look at Henderson Road to see what we can do there. So there's that revitalization of community that's happening as a result of redevelopment. And of course, our location is always our biggest competitive advantage. So there's a lot of, which people don't really like, but there are a lot of private developers are able to go in, buy homes, redevelop it, the Compass Homes and whatever, not to call anyone, but they tear down a house, put a new one there, and someone buys it. So you're also seeing, just like you said, that physical look where things are changing and things are being built up because the redevelopment is happening, and we're experiencing that in Upper Arlington.
Let me speak a little bit about your day-to-day job. So what does it entail? So you're a city council member, and as well as you're the mayor of the Upper Arlington city. So tell us a little bit about, there's two different roles, or?
Basically, we're city manager, council form of government, which means council elects its president. President is the mayor, right?
Gotcha.
And then we hire our city manager that executes on whatever policies and things like that. So day-to-day operations, the city manager handles, right? Executes on whatever policies and stuff we go. Mayorally, so the proclamations, the visiting the businesses, the shaking the hands, the kissing the babies, everything that you think about when you think about a mayor. That's what I do. That's the part that I do. And then run council.
You're suited for that part, I tell you that.
And then
because you're an open person, you know what I mean? Go ahead. Yeah.
And then run council in the sense of run the council meetings, do the leadership, figure out what we have on our legislative agenda, all those kind of things, corral my colleagues, all those. So day to day is different. Like Monday is always council meetings. And so there's always that, running that on Mondays. Thursdays, we tend to have our leadership meeting because our public agenda needs to be published on Thursday for the Monday meeting. So we have the leadership meeting to kind of set up our council agenda for Monday on Thursdays. It's meeting with people, leaders in the city, businesses, those kind of things. But I also have a day job.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. So how do you manage all that? Yeah.
It's very, very tough to manage. Very, 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 very tough to manage. And I definitely need to rethink it all. But public service doesn't pay. And so...
Doesn't pay or pay?
Does not pay. How... if I had been a Barack Obama that was what was he, an organizer or whatever? Community organizers, he put us onto that term. But he knew that at 20 and he built his life that way. It's different. People that build their life in public service and whatever. I came into public service long after I'd established my life and my lifestyle and those kind of things. So I can't live off public service salary, which is why I continue to work, continue to practice law. But certainly it's a very, very tough balance.
Do you work with the Upper Arlington Police Department, or that's a completely separate from? It's not like the same way that the mayor of the city of Columbus and the police department.
So that's all part of the city operations. So the chief reports to our city manager. But the city manager reports to council president. So we, I know everything. We impact all the policies for for the police. Every policy that gets passed comes before us.
That's how the org chart is built.
Yeah.
The city reports to
the city manager.
Reports
to
the
the main.
As a president, that's how you know what's going on. Tell us a little bit about some of the laws you practice.
Yeah.
Early on, you touched on a little bit the patent, or that was previous.
That's still what I do in intellectual property. Now I do mostly transactional type of work. So think partnerships, strategic partnerships, two people trying to invent something and trying to come up with a contract on how to do that. Those are generally what I do. Help strategize on IP portfolios. So large multinational corporations may have IP portfolios here and in China, and it's like, how do we help them strategize what the strategy is in the U.S. versus in China versus in Germany, and how do you enforce, right? Because enforcement rules are different in Germany. So working with local counsel in those countries to help advise the client. Those are kind of the things that I do. So a little bit international
law is
involved. Yeah. I like global work and global practice, and it's just innate in who I am, and I just continued to do it.
Yeah, and when I was going to college, globalization is something that I couldn't grasp. And right now, I mean, it's real.
We're such an interconnected world.
Now, some of my target market are like, thousand miles away.
Absolutely. And just trade. We trade with each other. We share ideas. And it's how do we do that amicably?
Absolutely. So what is the future, the long term, or how does it look like to you, the future long term in Arlington at the moment, what it is right now?
Exciting. If I could describe one word, it's exciting. I think our location is our competitive advantage. We're close to everything, to OSU, to downtown. I think when CODA figures out Link Us, which is a transportation system, then our location really becomes activated, because then people don't have to drive to downtown. How do we transit people downtown? Then they come and live. That's how I see it. I think we won't be a big player kind of in housing, but I think we do need to right size and understand how we place in figuring out some of the housing issues. Certainly we need to activate like our small businesses, so it's a place that people love to enjoy hanging out, and our proximity to the river, like east and west of us are hikes and rivers, and so I see a community that gets out on the sidewalk and goes outside and enjoys Griggs Reservation or, Scioto River and those kind of things. I definitely see that.
Back in my days, I used to run marathons.
Oh!
Yeah. I run a couple of marathons and a few half marathons here. And
nice.
I don't know if they go through still.
They still do. The Columbus Marathon still goes through UAE. It still goes through for Arlington. And every year we get to hear about, and it just keeps getting bigger each year. It's a well-known race across the country.
You ever tried to do that?
No, so I was but I'm a short distance kind of gal. Anything much longer than that, listen, I have done a marathon once in my life. It was a commitment and a lot, and I tore my quad in the middle of that race because it takes some kind of strategy to run a marathon. I think you have to be half crazy.
You were probably trying to win in some sort of thing. I was trying to complete the damn thing. It's different.
That is my problem. You're absolutely right. That is my problem.
I was trying to complete.
I don't know how to enjoy a marathon. No. I'm trying to do something. But maybe I might try it again. Long distance. I do 5Ks with my eyes closed. I'll do a 5K here and there and enjoy those. But, I go out there and run 3 days a week. I still enjoy running.
I saw, when you respond to my request, and I started to DM, like, this is happening. So I started digging a little bit about you, and I saw a trip that you went back to Nigeria and you were giving some speeches. Tell me more about that.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, it was the honor of my lifetime, actually, to
now
return.
You're the mayor and doing this big thing. So how do they view over there?
In awe. I mean, I think that's what it is in my language, is Dakada. It's that spirit, that Nigerian spirit, that it's not limited to just the boundaries of Nigeria, but you can take that and still achieve in this country where and community where you know no one. In Africa, there's a lot of godfathering, right? The godfather has to select you, and you have to then run for office, and then you're knighted and you're the political leader. And so the shock about this for them when they look at it is like, no one knighted you. They democracy. You just put get your name on the ballot and then people vote for you. It's such a wow thing, right? And then seeing a name like Ukeme Awakessien, which is my traditional name, and then people vote for that. Like, what? And on top of that, in the community that predominantly doesn't look like you, it validated kind of the achievement. Sometimes when you're achieving the thing, you don't recognize the magnitude for others. The girls that are inspired by it, the women that have never thought about public office, but now because they see you doing it, they're like, I can get in and advocate on that. I can get in and share. I hear women talk a lot about the child care crisis, and listen, I get in and I'm like, you need to bottle that passion into running for office so we can start thinking about policies around that, right? Not, I can't solve all the issues, right? We need bench strength. By bench strength, I mean more people in the arena. And so that experience for me, seeing the women and the young girls in my country that were completely inspired by my story, and they got to hear the story. I mean, in my little Upper Arlington circle, of course, people know it, but to bring that story to Nigeria, where people hadn't heard, and then they start to look at it and like, oh my God, and being wowed by it was something quite special. My mom and dad were very proud.
So how long is the term?
So 4 years. I'm up for re-election this year.
Okay.
So I'm going to be running again this year.
2025?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then then I'll have 4 more years from if I win in 2026 for 4 more years. Yeah.
Well, you did it once, you can do it again.
I can do it again. There you go. I hear being an incumbent is a little bit different. Right.
Yeah. So what is the future for, now you're in public service. I don't see you go back to private after that. You must have some sort of like a long term, but what do you have in the corner of your eye?
I don't. It's so funny because this was never in the plan. Right. Yeah. And when I stepped up in 2021 to run for office, had been nowhere. And I'm a big visionary, and I was like, never on the plan. So when I think about that, I think I have no idea what the future is going to be. I do know I enjoy public service. I do know I'm very fulfilled by it. But the moment has to be right, and I have to feel like the issues that need to be solved, that I'm the person to do it. So I don't know what that looks like for a future office. I know what it feels like. So when the moment feels right, I'm sure I'll step up and do something.
Final moment. You talked about those little girls getting inspired, your story, coming to a light. In generally, what do you have? What kind of advice would you leave in this podcast?
Particularly for young girls, but in general, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. I'll tell a story. I think we over-index on mentors and other people's experiences to tell us what to think about ourselves. And in doing that, we don't have that confidence or lose that light. I remember when I said, I'm going to run for office. I met with someone that had won 2 elections, had done all the things. I was looking for wisdom, mentor. It's the right thing to do, and people should do it. Seek wisdom all you want, but don't let it kill your light. And so we're talking, and this person is asking all these questions of what I've done and trying to assess what skills and experience I have to bring to run for office. And after listening to me, they were like, well, you're a little green. Why don't you give it a couple more years, maybe serve on 1 or 2 more committees within the city, and then run for office. And I thought, wow. And when I look back now, if I had taken that to heart, if I had made it say, oh, okay, I'm a little green, maybe I shouldn't, I wouldn't have done it. I had to believe in myself. I had to leave that conversation still saying, I hear you, but I also believe what I bring to the table. But the flip side to believing yourself is that you also have to be willing to fail. If you're too afraid of failure, just because you believe in yourself doesn't guarantee success. So I always say, believe in yourself, but also if that belief leads to failure, you have to be willing to take it too. As women, we are so conditioned not to, it breaks us when we fail rather than use it as a lesson. My story could have gone either way. I could have not won, and I would still have to pick up the pieces. So that would be what I would leave to people. Believe in yourself. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's not a ding on you.
A lot of people will take it personally and kind of sort of be hurt.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of failures in my life. Everyone sees the glossy highlights, but we don't talk about failure enough. So
failure is just great lessons. It just depends. It just depends on how deep. Like you said, very important things. And the other thing I want to add on is just filtering the incoming information from other people or incoming advice from other people, trying to kind of sort of align which one that best fits with your actions. You know what I mean? I think we should have been taught that rather than seek
permission or
mentorship.
mentor. Yes, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Because it can derail us.
At least learn how to differentiate. Check what you can get and leave, the rest of it. So don't let that. So, well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah,
This was delightful.
It
was such a delightful conversation.
And hopefully when you run back, we'll have you back and have a good conversation about that.
I would love that.
Thank you so much for your time. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
All right.